So, Jamie, back at it. Today, we're going to cover a question that we get every once in a while, and that is, what is the difference between holding precious metals in a bank versus holding it in a private vault? So maybe you could start out with explaining kind of what the basic differences are of those two, I'd say, fundamental structures.
Yeah. So there are in Switzerland and also other places like, for example, New Zealand or Singapore, there are private companies that specialize in offering vault storage for precious metals. And that's something that every now and then we get a client who thinks about that or who already works with a vault provider like that. And then they ask us, well, what are the options with the bank? What are like the upsides or downsides of keeping the precious metal with the bank? And I think there it's important to distinguish that there's a variety of ways of how you can hold precious metals with the bank. You can have just a metals account and keep ounces, for example, gold ounces or silver ounces, or even like a gold bar in your portfolio in those metals account. And then it's like similar to a currency, like you can buy and sell like fairly cost efficient. It's going to be booked in your portfolio. But then some people say they want to have the precious metal physical. It's not enough to them to just have it on paper, essentially. And then you have the option of keeping physical precious metals with the bank, not allocated to you personally. They just like promise essentially to have a shelf or a room with all the precious metals of all the clients that insist that their precious metal is held physically. We can do that, and we do have a handful of clients who chose that option. It's a little bit more costly and it's a little bit more complicated because we talk about like physical pieces of metal. But if you came here, like we could take you to the bank, you could have a look at your metal. And then there's also the option of just having like a vault essentially within the bank where you put in whatever you want to put in. And that's just completely yours and has essentially nothing to do with your bank account, just to give like an overview over what the different options
are. Those accounts or those vaults, I would say, are separated, so that your physical metal is actually not held in a where all the other metal is held. It's held in its separate private little holding.
Yes.
Now, depends on the bank if it's going to cost more or not. I think that's one thing that's always interesting to see. Some banks offer it in their management fee if you have an account there. Some don't. So it's gonna there's some. It depends.
Mostly it's going to cost more.
Correct, but it does depend.
It does depend.
And with a vault, on the other side, is it's a third party. They're outside of the regulation of a bank. Let's put it that way. They're not a bank.
Yes.
They're a vault. So there's much lower levels of regulation. So you have to be very good in your due diligence to ensure you're working with a good partner.
Yes.
With banks, they are so highly regulated, and they have to do things a certain way that there's kind of an oversight, that a third-party oversight that makes sure the bank is acting appropriately. With the vaults, a little bit more of the Wild West. Some clients want that. Some clients are interested in that. But it's something that you really have to consider. I think the other side is when you're holding physical metals, in Switzerland especially, the white metals have a VAT tax on them for the process of buying and selling.
Yes, and that VAT is very significant. It's around 20%.
Yeah.
So holding white metals physically in Switzerland almost never makes sense.
Yeah.
For gold, it's a little bit different. If you are going for a vault provider, it makes it's essential that you make sure that they are audited by an external third party and that they are insured. I think those are the absolute minimums that you have to ask for. Some sort of proof for the audits and some sort of proof that they are insured. As you mentioned, like they're outside of like the regulated banking industry. So some people see that as an advantage. Some people see that as a disadvantage. I think every person has to decide for themselves whether or not they want that. The question is always like, why are you holding precious metals? What are you hoping to achieve? For us, we believe the precious metals are a great way of diversifying. They are like a stabilizer in the portfolio. So we typically like to hold a certain percentage of the portfolio in precious metals. Typically, we hold them in precious metals account. Typically, we don't have them physically separated as like physical bars. But again, if someone asks for that specifically, that's something that we can adhere to. We can organize for that. but typically it's only if the client specifically wants it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. I think that kind of covers where we want to go with this conversation. It's not a wildly complex situation, and that kind of gives it a pretty good idea. If you have more questions watching this video, shoot us an email, go to our website, and always do your due diligence on any institution you work with, whether it's a wealth manager like us, a bank, a vault, any financial professional. Make sure you do your due diligence and you listen to your gut.
Absolutely.